Every smile hides a secret. Every gesture conceals a fragment of the soul we are not meant to see. Yet the truth of a person does not reveal itself in hours of conversation, in years of companionship, or in the polished masks of social exchange. It emerges in sudden fractures, tiny cracks in time, when the unconscious leaks through. And it is in these cracks, not in the carefully curated image, that the essence of a human being is laid bare. You see, most people cannot accept themselves completely. Within them lives a shadow, raw, unfiltered, sometimes dark, terrified of being exposed. That is why the smile appears too quickly, the compliment flows too easily, the assurance of "I'm fine" is repeated too often. The mask is there to protect them from rejection, from judgment, from themselves. But the mask is fragile, and if you know where to look, it slips. Only 2 moments are required to see a person as they truly are. Not a lifetime, not endless analysis, just 2. The first moment, observe how they treat the powerless. Do not watch how they bow before the wealthy, the influential, or the admired. That is mere performance. Instead, watch how they address the forgotten. Notice the tone they use with a cleaner, the look in their eyes when a delivery worker stands before them, the patience or impatience they show to a child asking for help. In these fleeting encounters, the shadow speaks, for when the ego believes no advantage is at stake, the true character rushes to the surface. The second moment, observe them under adversity, not in times of celebration when laughter is easy, but in the grip of frustration, loss, or humiliation. When the structures of comfort collapse, the naked psyche emerges. Some reveal cruelty, others reveal resilience. Some collapse into bitterness, while others awaken a quiet nobility. Adversity strips away the mask and exposes the architecture of the soul. Together, these 2 tests, the powerless and adversity, are the mirrors of character. One reveals how a person treats those from whom they have nothing to gain. The other reveals how they act when they themselves have everything to lose. Do not mistake this for cynicism. It is not about catching others in their weakness. It is about cultivating awareness. When we look with open eyes, when we train ourselves to observe these moments, we no longer live blinded by appearances. We see others not as they pretend to be, but as they are. And perhaps in doing so, we also confront the shadow within ourselves. For the greatest test of all is not in judging others, but in asking, how do I treat the powerless? How do I act under adversity? In that reflection, the truth of our own character await. The mask that a human being wears is never merely a social accessory. It is a survival mechanism, a carefully woven veil of smiles, polite gestures, and phrases that keep the deeper reality of the psyche hidden. Every culture teaches its children the art of this mask, how to speak respectfully, how to bow at the right time, how to show enthusiasm when enthusiasm is absent, and how to hide pain behind the assurance of "I am fine." But beneath this mask lies another presence, an unseen force that psychology has called the shadow. The shadow is not inherently evil, nor is it always destructive, but it is the unpolished, unfiltered truth of the human being. It is what remains when social performance is stripped away. It is where unacknowledged desires, fears, resentments, and vulnerabilities reside. And it is this tension between the mask and the shadow that determines the authenticity or the deception of a person's character. The mask presents itself as virtue, as charm, as self-control. It seeks to be acceptable in the eyes of society, but the shadow, by its nature, cannot fully conform. It leaks out in moments when the ego is distracted, when the conscious mind cannot maintain its performance. A sudden look of disdain, a slip of the tongue, an unexpected silence, or even an involuntary smirk can reveal what words and manners conceal. That is why the most attentive observers of human nature do not focus on what is said, but on what escapes without intention. In those fragments of behavior, the mask falters and the shadow speaks. This is why understanding the mask and the shadow is central to understanding human character. To judge a person by their mask is to judge by illusion. The mask is always prepared for judgment. It is designed for praise, for admiration, for defense. But the shadow is unprepared. It resists exposure, fears rejection, and yet holds the most genuine. Truth. The paradox is that the very thing we hide from others is often the clearest reflection of who we are. A person may present as endlessly kind, endlessly agreeable, endlessly cheerful, and yet if the shadow is fueled by resentment or insecurity, their mask will eventually fracture under pressure. What leaks through those fractures is more authentic than the mask they have polished for years. Most people live in fear of their own shadow. They fear that if it is seen, it will bring condemnation. And so they smile more often than necessary. They speak in excess of praise. They perform their identity as if life were a theater stage. But the shadow does not disappear simply because it is hidden. It waits. It waits in the unconscious, gathering strength, surfacing in dreams, slipping into habits, emerging in sudden moments of stress. The very thing we try hardest to hide becomes the very thing that defines us most. To see someone's true character, therefore, is not a matter of prolonged interaction or endless words. It is a matter of observation and patience. It requires noticing when the mask slips and the shadow reveals itself. A nervous laugh in the wrong moment, a flash of contempt in the eyes, an uncontrolled tone when addressing someone without status. These are the micro moments where the hidden soul comes to light. The mask may deceive, but the shadow cannot lie for long. And so the first step in perceiving a person as they are is to recognize the duality between the mask they present and the shadow they conceal. Every human being, without exception, carries both. The error is not in wearing the mask, society demands it, but in forgetting that it is only a mask, not the essence. To see another clearly, and even to see ourselves clearly, we must not confuse the polished performance with the living truth. For the truth always waits beneath, raw and unrefined, whispering through the smallest cracks in time. If you wish to see the truth of a human being, watch not how they shine in moments of triumph, but how they tremble, stumble, or endure when adversity presses down upon them. Ease, prosperity, and celebration rarely expose the depths of the soul. These circumstances permit the mask to remain firmly in place, for it requires little effort to be gracious when the winds of fortune are favorable. But suffering, loss, humiliation, and frustration strip away the comfort that sustains the performance. Under pressure, the mask fractures and the unconscious rushes to the surface. What a person reveals in such moments is not rehearsed, not polished, but raw, an unguarded glimpse of their inner architecture. Adversity is the great revealer. Some, when pressed by difficulty, reveal cruelty. Their words sharpen, their patience vanishes, and their hidden resentments pour out like venom. Others, when struck by loss, reveal fragility, collapsing inward, consumed by bitterness or despair. Yet there are those who, even under immense suffering, reveal an unexpected nobility, a quiet strength, a refusal to relinquish dignity, a capacity for compassion, even when their own pain is unbearable. These are not traits one can fabricate in the moment. They emerge from what lies deeply rooted in the psyche, cultivated long before adversity arrives. Thus, crisis is not the creator of character, but the revealer of it. Consider how easily we are deceived by appearances in times of prosperity. A man may seem generous when his resources overflow, but generosity under abundance costs little. A woman may seem calm and kind when everything aligns with her desires, but such calmness proves nothing of her inner resilience. Remove the comforts, however, strip away the wealth, the admiration, the safety, and then observe what remains. Does the generosity persist when resources are scarce? Does kindness survive? When no one is watching? Does the voice that once spoke of ideals turn bitter, cynical, and resentful when those ideals demand sacrifice? These questions are answered only in adversity, never in ease. This principle extends not only to individuals, but to entire societies. History shows us that civilizations reveal their true values not during times of abundance, but during famine, war, or crisis. Similarly, the individual psyche is tested in its darkest hours. In such times, the ego is stripped of its illusions, and the shadow rises. If the shadow is poisoned by selfishness, it will manifest as cruelty and betrayal. If it contains unacknowledged strength, wisdom, or compassion, those qualities will shine forth, often surprising even the person themselves. It is important to understand that adversity does not only mean catastrophic events. It can be found in the small frustrations of daily life. Observe how someone behaves when their patience is tested by inconvenience, when plans collapse, when pride is wounded by criticism, or when they are forced to wait. These moments are less dramatic but no less revealing. In such instances, the mask loosens, and the unconscious speaks plainly. The person who maintains respect for others, even while angry, who remains gentle even in disappointment, demonstrates that their core is anchored in something deeper than circumstance. There is also a paradox here worth noting. Those who cannot accept their own shadow often suffer more under adversity, for they are at war with themselves. Unable to integrate the darker aspects of their being, they lash out, blame others, or collapse into despair. But those who have faced their inner contradictions, who have accepted the presence of both light and darkness within, often endure with a strange serenity. Their suffering does not erase their dignity, but deepens it, allowing them to emerge with a wisdom that no amount of ease could have taught. To train the eye to see beyond appearances is not merely an act of curiosity, it is an act of awakening. Most people move through life deceived by the surface of things. They take words as truth, gestures as sincerity, and public images as reality. Yet beneath every polished exterior lies another dimension that is harder to see but infinitely more real, the unconscious life that slips out in subtle, often unnoticed cracks of behavior. The path to awareness, therefore, is not about learning elaborate techniques of manipulation or strategies of judgment, but about cultivating a deeper perception. It is about refining the capacity to notice what is always present yet rarely acknowledged. This awareness begins with silence. One cannot perceive the small tremors of truth in another if one's mind is crowded with noise, assumptions, or the need to control. The quiet observer sees what the distracted mind misses. A fleeting shift in tone, an almost invisible tightening of the jaw, a moment of hesitation in the eyes. These are the places where the unconscious reveals itself. To the inattentive, these moments mean nothing. To the aware, they speak volumes. The path to awareness is, in this sense, the cultivation of attention. It is learning to look without immediately interpreting, to listen without rushing to judgment, to wait until the shadow reveals itself naturally. But awareness is not only directed outward, it must also turn inward. If we are blind to our own shadow, we will misinterpret the shadows of others. Projection is the great distortion of human perception. We see in others what we cannot accept in ourselves. The person who denies their own envy may perceive jealousy everywhere. The one who suppresses their anger may interpret strength as hostility. The one who fears weakness may mistake vulnerability for manipulation. To see others clearly, then, requires first that we confront our own contradictions. Awareness of the self is the foundation of awareness of the other. Without this inner clarity, what we call observation is often nothing more than projection disguised as insight. When awareness matures, the world begins to look different. People are no longer seen only through the lens of their performances. One notices instead the small interactions that reveal the architecture of their being. Awareness reveals that a person's philosophy matters less than their treatment of a stranger, that their reputation matters less than their reaction under stress, that their polished mask matters far less than the shadow peeking through in unguarded moments. This shift in perception does not make one cynical. Rather, it makes one compassionate. For when we truly see others, we recognize not only their flaws, but also their hidden struggles. The harsh tone, the impatient gesture, the cold indifference, these are often the expressions of a shadow terrified of rejection. To see this clearly is to understand that cruelty often masks fear, arrogance often hides insecurity, and indifference often conceals deep wounds. The path to awareness, therefore, is not a weapon, but a responsibility. Once we see the truth beneath appearances, we must decide how to respond. Awareness can make us manipulators, using insight to exploit others, or it can make us healers, using insight to connect with the humanity even within the shadow. The choice lies in the maturity of the observer. True awareness is never about superiority. It is about understanding. It is not about catching people in their weakness, but about seeing them as whole beings, mask, shadow, and all. The final and most difficult step is to turn the gaze inward. It is easy, almost comforting, to observe the character of others, to analyze their masks, to notice their shadows, to judge their behavior with the powerless or under adversity. But the true challenge and the most transformative task is to apply the same mirror to oneself. For what use is the knowledge of human nature if it remains a tool for scrutinizing others while leaving one's own depths unexplored? To truly understand character, we must ask the most unsettling questions of all. How do I treat those who cannot benefit me, and how do I act when life strips me of its comforts? These questions, simple in form, pierce straight through the illusions we weave about ourselves. Most people live with a flattering image of their own character. They tell themselves they are kind, generous, resilient, or wise. Yet these self-conceptions are often little more than extensions of the mask, rehearsed narratives designed to protect the ego. The unconscious is less easily deceived. Deep inside, every person knows there are cracks between who they believe themselves to be and who they actually are when tested. This is why moments of self-reflection can feel so uncomfortable. They confront us with evidence that our shadow is more alive, more influential than we admit. To acknowledge this honestly is the beginning of transformation. Consider first the question of how we treat the powerless. When you pass a stranger who asks for help, what reflex arises in you? When you interact with someone serving you in a position of invisibility, do you meet their eyes or do you turn away as though they are an extension of the environment? When confronted by a child's interruption, do you display patience or do you respond with irritation? These are not trivial moments. They are the mirrors of your own shadow. The small reflexes that emerge when no one is watching reveal whether your compassion is genuine or a performance designed for approval. To admit to oneself that arrogance, indifference, or impatience often leaks through is not to condemn oneself, but to finally see the truth. Only what is seen can be transformed. The second question, how we behave under adversity, is equally revealing. It is simple to believe that we are resilient, calm, or dignified when life flows in our favor. But what happens when frustration strikes, when loss cuts deeply, when humiliation burns the ego? Do we lash out at those closest to us? Do we collapse into self-pity? Do we seek to wound others as a way of easing our own wounds? Or do we find within ourselves a hidden strength, a quiet dignity that persists even when the world seems cruel? These are not questions that can be answered in theory. They are answered in the lived reality of suffering. Yet to reflect honestly on past experiences of adversity can show us much. If we see that cruelty or weakness arose, we must resist the urge to justify it. Instead, we must accept that this too is part of who we are. Acceptance, not denial, is the first step toward growth. The danger in observing others is that it can become a shield against self-knowledge. We begin to pride ourselves on seeing through masks while ignoring the fact that we are still wearing our own. True awareness demands humility. It demands that we admit we are no different from those we judge, that the same shadow lives within us, and that under the right conditions, we too are capable of arrogance, cruelty, or despair. Yet it also means acknowledging that we are capable of dignity, resilience, and compassion. The shadow is not only darkness, it contains unused strength, unrecognized potential, waiting to be integrated. Beautiful. We've now reached the full closing arc. What you have is a 5-part, deeply expanded lecture-style speech that begins with the mask and the shadow, moves into the 2 defining revelations of character, treatment of the powerless and response to adversity, then opens the path to awareness and finally returns inward to self-reflection. If you'd like, I can weave all the parts together into one seamless speech, polishing the transitions so it flows like a single powerful lecture without any breaks or section markers. Would you like me to do that, or do you prefer to keep them as separate expanded keynote pieces?